The abyss is a place of profound silence and crushing pressure. Down here, kilometers below the sunlit world, the rules of the surface don't apply. Our missions into this realm are meticulously planned, executed with robotic proxies designed to withstand an environment more hostile than space. We are digital ghosts, our senses extended by fiber optic tethers, exploring the last true frontier on our own planet. Every dive is a journey into the unknown, but even the unknown has a certain predictability. There are protocols. There are expectations. There is the familiar rhythm of the deep, the hum of the machinery, the steady ping of the sonar, the slow drift of particulate matter in the beam of our lights. This dive was completely routine, another methodical transect across a desolate abyssal plain. We were mapping the seafloor, gathering data on geology and extremophilic life. The vehicle, call sign Hades 7, was performing flawlessly, its systems stable despite the immense strain. We were pushing the operational limits of our equipment, certainly, but it was nothing we hadn't done before. The darkness was absolute, the landscape a uniform expanse of fine-grained sediment unchanged for millennia. We were simply painting by numbers, filling in a blank spot on the map. The only company was the sound of our own technology, a lonely pulse in an ocean of quiet. Until the scanner did this. It was a single, sharp, anomalous return. A definitive spike on the waterfall display where there should have been nothing but the gentle slope of the seabed. The system flagged it instantly. Movement. A clear, solid contact. The initial reaction in the control room was skepticism. It had to be a glitch, a processing error, a ghost in the machine caused by a pressure fluctuation or a magnetic anomaly. These things happen. The deep plays tricks on electronics. We ran a diagnostic and initiated a targeted rescan of the sector. For a moment, everything returned to normal. The spike was gone. The contact had vanished. We logged it as a sensor malfunction and were about to move on. Then it moved again. This time, the return was stronger, the position undeniably closer. It wasn't a ghost. It was real. A flurry of questions erupted. What could it be? A large, uncatalogued creature? Unlikely. The movement was too deliberate, too clean. A geological event, like a gas plume or a small landslide. The sonar signature didn't match. It was a solid, discrete object. At this depth, nothing should react with such speed and precision. The crushing pressure, the near-freezing temperatures, the complete absence of light. It all conspires to make life slow and movement economical. This was different. This was an exception to the rule. As we closed the distance, our high-frequency imaging sonar began to resolve its shape. The data that came back made no sense. We saw lines, angles, edges too perfect to be natural. Nature, especially under the immense uniform pressure of the abyss, prefers curves and fractals. It abhors straight lines. But the movement wasn't random either. We noticed a pattern, a subtle shift in its position, a minute displacement that occurred every single time our sonar pulse swept over it. It was timed. It wasn't just moving. It was responding to our presence, to our attempt to see it. The implications of that were staggering. It suggested a level of reactivity, of complex behavior that we were not prepared for. It was one thing to find an anomaly. It was another thing entirely to find an anomaly that was aware of you. A brief burst of static corrupted our data feed, a sudden electronic shriek that cleared as quickly as it came. It felt like a warning. That's when we saw it. The ROV's lights finally fell upon the object itself, and the sight silenced the entire control room. It was a dark, matte material that seemed to absorb the light, its surface impossibly smooth. There was no corrosion, no biofouling. In the deep ocean, everything becomes a reef. Life clings to any available surface. But this object was pristine, as if it had been placed there only moments ago. Along its surface ran a seam, a join so precise it was almost invisible. It wasn't debris. It wasn't a lost piece of equipment or wreckage from a ship. The angles were too intentional, the construction too refined. Our laser scanners confirmed its dimensions. Compact yet mass spectrometry readings suggested it was incredibly dense. It looked engineered, purpose-built. But for what? And by whom? We began a slow, circular survey, mapping every angle, every surface, trying to understand its form and function. And the scanner kept insisting. Something was moving. This was the most baffling part. The object itself was stationary on the seafloor, but the initial sonar contact, the small mobile signature, was still there. Now, it was circling the object, maintaining a fixed distance. It was as if we had found not one anomaly, but two, a physical artifact, and some kind of energetic or physical guardian orbiting it. The tactical computer, processing the conflicting data, issued a stark recommendation: abort. The situation was outside all known parameters. We couldn't leave. Not yet. So we tested a simple idea. If it was reacting to our scans, would it react to physical proximity? We extended the ROV's manipulator arm, moving it slowly, cautiously toward the seam. We watched the sonar display. As the arm's pincers drew within a meter of the surface, the mobile signature, the dot, instantly jumped. It repositioned itself on the far side of the object, maintaining its distance. It was avoiding the arm. It reacted. The moment we confirmed it, our data link flooded with static. The video feed degraded, the telemetry readouts flickered, and a low-frequency boom resonated through the ROV's hydrophones, a sound of immense pressure. For a terrifying half-second, every screen went black. We lost contact. Then, as suddenly as it began, the interference stopped. The lights on Hades 7 stabilized, the feed was clear again. Like it knew we were there. Like it had flexed a muscle, demonstrating its ability to control our access, to blind us at will. The message was unambiguous: stay back. We retracted the arm. The mystery deepened. What was this thing? A weapon? A probe? A beacon? Some systems respond to scanning. Active defense mechanisms in military hardware, for example, can be triggered by certain radar or sonar frequencies. But this felt different, more biological than electronic. Our thermal sensors, now focused on the seam, picked up a faint rhythmic pulse, a barely perceptible temperature differential, appearing and disappearing in a steady rhythm. It was cold, not hot, as if it were absorbing energy from the surrounding water in a controlled cycle. We had to know its mass. We had to know if it was anchored. With extreme caution, we gripped the edge of the object with the manipulator. The strain gauges immediately maxed out. It was heavier than anything we could have imagined. With thrusters at full power, we managed to lift it, but only by a few centimeters. As the seal was stressed, microfractures spiderwebbed near the seam, and a stream of tiny, effervescent bubbles escaped, dissipating instantly in the crushing pressure. It wasn't air. The chemical sensors read nothing. The gas was inert, unknown. And then, the movement changed. The moment the seal was breached, the orbiting signature on the sonar went haywire. It moved erratically, at impossible speeds, filling the display with frantic vectors. Then, just as suddenly, it froze. The system warnings screamed across our monitors. Critical power fluctuations, sensor failures, cascading errors. We stopped. Immediately, we released the object, setting it back down into the sediment with a heavy final thud, because that's when it hit us. The realization washed over the control room with a cold certainty. The reactive movement, the impossibly dense mass, the pristine surface, the violent reaction to being disturbed. This wasn't treasure. It wasn't a discovery to be brought to the surface and studied. The object wasn't. It was being held. The mobile signature wasn't a guardian. It was part of the lock. The entire system was a cage. This was containment. It was placed here, deliberately, in one of the most inaccessible places on Earth, buried under kilometers of water and unimaginable pressure. Not to hide it, but to imprison it. The question was no longer what was it, but what was it, and who, or what, had put it there. We redacted the coordinates from the public log. This was a location that needed to be forgotten. So we did the only safe thing, the only sane thing. We reversed our actions. We used the manipulator arm not to explore, but to conceal. We pushed the disturbed sediment back over the object, burying the seam, restoring its shallow grave as best we could. We were no longer explorers. We were groundskeepers, tidying up a place we should never have been. We buried it again. As the last grains of sand covered it, our sonar returned to normal. The seafloor was empty. The contact was gone. But just as we were about to pull back, there was one last spike, a single faint ping from the object's location, a final fleeting acknowledgement. But something stayed active. The orbiting signature was gone, but the thermal pulse near the seam. It was still there, faint but steady, a cold heartbeat in the dark. We had broken the seal, however, slightly. We had woken something up. Or perhaps we had only alerted it to our presence. We logged the site. We classified the data at the highest level, sealing the dive logs, the sensor readings, the video feeds. The official report lists the dive as incomplete due to equipment malfunction. The location is now a permanent restricted zone. No transit, no exploration, no scans. A black hole on our charts. And we left, before it changed again. Before whatever was inside decided we were a threat that needed to be neutralized. There are things in the deep that humanity is not ready for. Places we are not meant to go, and objects we are not meant to find. We went there, we found one, and we were left with the terrifying knowledge that some things don't get lost. They get locked. And we may have just picked the lock. Subscribe, because the ocean hasn't finished talking,